Melissa Marquez, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jason?
I already know you're good. Like, this is our first conversation. I know our conversation is like 25 minutes old. So I feel like we're making
No,
up for
I'm
lost
glad we
time.
have like a face to face finally.
Oh my God. So I started following you, I don't know, years ago on Twitter. And I
It's been a
don't
while
know.
since we've chatted. Like
It
it's been a while
has.
that we've been chatting rather.
Yes, yeah. And I think maybe it was the fact that I was like talking about Jaws because we did Jaws on the Sunday night watch party like years ago, and I always refer to that as one of our big nights we ever did because this movie has such a cultural resonance. People always talk about like where they were the first time they saw it, no matter how old they are. I mean, this movie's older than both of us, unless you are somehow way older than I am. So not to judge, I don't want to be that guy, right? But it's like but they're like shark Twitter is like a thing, and like there's like a fish Twitter, and there are people like it's not just like history stuff. And I was so excited. This pod is like over a year in the making. You and I were just talking
Yeah.
because we were gonna do this like a year ago, and
Yeah.
then
No, it's
schedules.
I'm so excited to finally be on here and chat sharks with you because like you said, the shark
I am too.
world, like the shark science world is such a prominent presence on the internet, at least for me. I mean, immersed in it, so obviously I think it's like a big thing, but I feel like a lot of people are like, yeah, there's a lot more shark scientists and researchers and advocates than I thought, and it's like, oh no, we're there.
God, you guys are so much cooler than histories. And this is bad, right? Because I'm about to insult all the people who listen to this podcast. Like, this is origin. I'm like, no, fuck no, motherfucker. This is an ichthyologist at the. Wait a second. I wrote down a thing that. How do I say this word? Chondrichthian species. How do
Chondrichthyans.
I say this? Yes, right. Yes, chondrichthian. This is at the. Yeah, I know where. I'm from Florida. I know where sharks are.
Huh?
So no, it's like a thing. You guys are like I see guys posting, and I wanted like you and I've been friends on here for a while, so I wanted for you specifically to be on this pod because we know each other for a little while on the Twitter and stuff like that. But there's like so many cool people like posting all this cool shit that you guys do, and I'm like, let's talk about that. So thank you for taking the time. I know you probably talk about this movie all people must ask you about this thing all the time, do they not? Or
I'd
do you
be a
get a lot of shark
billionaire
stuff?
if I'd be a billionaire if I had like a penny or a dollar for every single time that somebody has asked me about sharks, or Jaws and my perception of Jaws, or like what I think about Jaws in the grand scheme of like shark
Okay.
conservation and shark perceptions. Unfortunately, I don't charge that way. So I'm still, middle class.
Oh, good, because I'm not sending you any money. I do have stickers I'm going to send to you, and judging by the distance from here to where you are, they might arrive in the next,
Next
I
year.
don't know, 3 to 6 years. So
Yeah.
sometime, by the time we have Jaws, why haven't we had a new Jaws movie?
Oh, it's
I
because
was
we
thinking
have
about that
the
today
Sharknadoes
as I
coming
was
out.
looking. Oh yeah, and the Meg. Actually, we're doing the Meg 2 on this pod as well,
That's true. Yeah.
but not with
Meg
the
2
shark
just recently
scientists.
came out. So you've had, I feel like Jaws was the foundation for a lot of the new shark movies that are out there. And so people are like, "Oh, it's a classic, let's not touch it." And then build off of it instead. Which, to be honest,
Oh
I'm kind
no,
of sad that they
it's
haven't
the
remade it.
classic. No, you can't remake perfection. I mean,
No.
and this movie I was watching this morning, and it's so good. It's just like it comes out in '75, and I'm watching, and it still feels like a new film. I mean, but it's just so well done. It also feels, you're just saying this like about the other Sharknado movie stuff. It's like the king of all the beast movies. Like, I mean, there's King Kong and Godzilla, but I think
Mm.
Jaws is even bigger than them in a lot of ways.
I,
It's a
I think
better
it's
movie.
up there. I think it's up there. Like when you think of, for lack of a better word, monsters, I feel like you've got King
Yeah,
Kong, you've got Godzilla, you've got Jaws. Like those are the three that a lot of
my
people think of when they
mother-in-law
think
is
of
for
like
a while.
classic monsters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like you don't have a Lake Placid movie without Jaws, right? And
No.
in the '80s, there were all these like B movies. There were like the Parada movies and stuff like
Oh
that
yeah.
that came out, and Anaconda.
Oh
There's
yeah.
any
It's
number of
true.
things,
There's been a
right?
lot of attempts to kind of, no, I don't want to say dethrone, but at least get up there with those top three. But I don't know, for me, and maybe it's just because I'm like one of those classic people that's kind of what I grew up with, was those three. I'm like, oh, can't really touch them.
No, no, I don't think so. It's just this is, and I always say like this and Star Wars changes the way that people go to the movies. They're the two blockbusters that, you know, just from a historical perspective of like the way people go to the movies and the way we see the summer. But like this, it's what it's April 3rd here, April 4th where you are, right?
Yes.
Because yeah, all right. We're gonna release this pod probably in May because this is like the summer movie. You know, this is
Always
like the
is.
Memorial Day. We're going back to the beach every year, right? You don't have Shark Week without it, which you have intimate, knowledge of Shark Week. I'm sure we'll talk about that today. Like this movie has so much stuff to do. Before we jump into it, though, we have other things to do. We have to introduce you to our listeners. So, do you want to introduce? Like, we're just people are like, who are? What do you guys? Hi, you want to introduce yourself to our audience and what you're doing here?
Yeah, I just realized we've been going for 10 minutes. It's like, oh, people are like, all right, well, I think she's a shark scientist. I think she's
They're
in
used to it.
Australia. So, hi, everyone. I'm Melissa.
Well,
Cristina
they
Márquez.
read the theme,
Well, maybe they didn't.
right? Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, hi, I'm Melissa Cristina Márquez. I'm a marine biologist, a science communicator, and an advocate for shark conservation. My work largely revolves around dispelling myths and misconceptions about sharks while highlighting their crucial role in our marine ecosystems, as well as studying our relationship with sharks over time and how that has changed through different mediums.
Let's get ready to give you another penny for yet more questions about Jaws. This is like, I felt so cliche. I was like, you want to talk about Jaws? Like, you could ask me about La La Land or something else, some other movie that you might like. I don't know. So, all right, and okay, so you're in Australia now. We're just like, what's Australia time? So for Americans, there are other countries outside of the U.S. That you can go to. That are lovely, and you're in Oz now. Where are you in Australia now?
So I'm currently based out of Sydney, Australia, so the eastern
Okay.
part of Australia. So I've been doing my PhD here in Australia for the last couple of years, and just looking again into that relationship between us and sharks over the past decades, if not centuries, and how that has changed over time. So it's been a really interesting PhD, that's for sure, and I've learned quite a lot about it. And of course, Jaws has come up many a time when it comes to my discussions of each of my different
Oh my
chapters.
gosh. Well, it's a real thing because I want to get into this idea about how you leave how you come from the U.S. and then go all the way to Australia to do your work. Most of us end up doing our doctor work, probably stay fairly close to home. Obviously, but it's a big damn ocean, and sharks, I don't think, really care a whole lot about international borders, but maybe that's just me. Not so much. All right, good. Learn so much about sharks. So we'll get into this. All right, let's talk about Jaws and like why this matters. This particular movie, because we talked about this. We did this movie on the Sunday night watch party several years ago. It's actually one of our bigger nights. This movie has cultural resonance, as you were saying. You get asked about this movie. Is this the film you get asked about most of all?
Oh, I think it's this, any of the Meg movies, and Sharknado. Mostly, like, it's mostly Jaws, but it's those three in particular.
I love the idea that there's a holy trinity of shark movies, and they include Jason Statham.
Of course.
So I've got to start working on my Jason Statham accent. Like I've got to figure out how to start working one. Like I can do it to Barack Obama. Actually, my Obama is terrible. I can do a really good Bill Clinton, but I've got to work on a Jason Statham. This is important because I'm curious about how Jaws resonates in Australia. When you've got this real cultural export from the U.S. You grew up with this film. Is it big in Australia as well? People are also super familiar with this film.
I mean, look, I feel like Jaws was very much a global sensation, not just something that was
Mm-hmm.
centralized in the States. Obviously, it was aired in the States first, but I do think it became a cultural global phenomenon, especially because parts of the Jaws filmed were actually shot by two people from Australia. So Valerie and Rob Taylor. And so they were known as prominent spearfishers, for lack of a better word, and to kind of encompass it all over, who then very much turned into some of the first shark advocates here in Australia. So when they shot some of the scenes, specifically the scenes where you see an actual shark in Jaws, not Bruce the mechanical shark, they shot those. And so obviously that then made news over here, especially with them really becoming advocates for sharks. Valerie Taylor, actually, who is still alive today, unfortunately, her husband passed quite a while ago. She is one of the most prominent shark conservationists here in Australia, and she is part of the reason. And a lot of scientists here and conservationists here actually credit her being a very large reason as to why the sand tiger shark, or I think it's called, what's the name of it? It's another word here. It's like a ragged-toothed sandy nurse shark or something like that. It's like a ragged-toothed nurse shark, they call it here. But over in the States, we'll know it as the sand tiger shark. She is part of one of the reasons why they are protected, actually, here, the eastern population. And so, yeah, it's definitely has its roots here, and it's entrenched in the culture. But I don't think it's as... I don't want to say as feared, but I don't think it's had as much of an impact as, say, in the States, because so much of our population here in Australia is by the coast that more often than not you have personal relationships or personal experiences with these animals that trump whatever it was that you watched on Jaws.
Yeah, all right. I have so many questions, of course, and you and I have almost crossed paths so many times. We were both talking about Puerto Rico and Florida. I have yet to be in Australia. As soon as some university wants to bring me out, I am on a plane for 1,000 hours, however long it takes to get over there. Yeah, I've got to is the flight to Australia, is that where you're shelling out for the better seats just because it's such a long way to get over there?
I mean, look, the majority of the time that I've traveled from here back home to Puerto Rico and Mexico, I've been in economy. There are many times that I'm like, man, I wish I could afford business class or even extra economy for the extra leg room and stuff like that. It is a testament to patience and to comfort. And as I get older and older, I'm like, you know what? I think I will shell out a little bit more money just for a bit of extra leg room or the aisle seat, not be next to the toilets or something like that.
Yeah. I'm dying to go over there. All right. People like, Jason, we don't care about where you want to visit. Everybody knows I want to go back to Prague. Stop talking about beer all the time. Anyway, all right. We talked about Jaws, this conservation. We're going to get into this. What are your general thoughts when I asked you to do this film? I know that you get asked about it a lot. Your general feelings towards Jaws when you think about it. How do you feel about this movie as a scientist?
I really appreciate its impact on popular culture. And the ability has, even today, not even has even today, its ability to instill this kind of sense of awe and fear for the ocean. But I also very much recognize its shortcomings in portraying sharks accurately. The funny thing is a lot of people are like, oh, you must hate Jaws, you must hate Jaws. And it's so funny because I know so many colleagues, so shark scientists, who the reason why they went into shark science was because of Jaws. And so it's just really interesting to me how divisive this movie can be. It made people, some people are absolutely terrified to even get into bathtubs because of Jaws, thinking that a shark is going to come out of the drain. And other people are like, no, this movie is what set my fascination and awe for these animals into motion and has made it so it's a lifelong career for me. So yeah, I think I really appreciate and respect its ability to transcend all sorts of, I guess, expectations, and also what people still feel like towards sharks.
Spielberg has this amazing ability to do that, right? Because he does that with Indiana Jones as well. Because I know of so many archaeologists who go into archaeology because of that film. And of course, archaeology is nothing like what they see in Raiders of the Lost Ark or Last Crusade or anything like that. It's like this reverse thing's like, yeah, we're gonna sell this, but actually it's this over here. There are no movies that inspire anybody to become a historian. Just nothing. Like we're just I know my just not at all. We're just like, ooh, the archive. No, actually, it turns out like we have National Treasure, but that's fine. All
I was
right.
gonna say, yeah, you've got
I
National
don't want to
Treasure,
bang
but
on.
that
I don't
doesn't
want.
really depict the field accurately.
It doesn't actually, and so I'm friends with those screenwriters. They're going to come on to do because that was the very first movie we ever did on the Watch Party, like years ago and back in 2018. So I just talked to the screenwriters the other day. They're going to come back on to be on the pod, which I'm stoked about. But
That's
it's a fun movie that plays with history, which is all you're really trying to do with movies, right? So I'm totally excited to see them. I kind of owe this whole HATM thing to them, or in some ways, maybe I'm damned by this. I don't know. All right, before we start banging on this movie, start talking about all the bad stuff. Let's talk about the good stuff. Are there parts of this movie that you like that you kind of get into?
I really love the film's suspenseful storytelling, and it's got quite a few iconic scenes. I think the opening sequence is definitely one of the most iconic ones, and it's also one of the more gruesome ones as well. But I mean, just that opening scene really sets the tone for the rest of the movie, as well as the really intense finale on the boat of like the culmination of the entire film just comes to this apex. And so I think those moments really capture the primal fear that's associated with the unknown depths of the ocean. And a lot of people feel this fear, but they can never really adequately express it. And so I feel like Jaws really captured it well and almost gives almost like a finger for people to be able to point at and be like, that is what I am afraid of. That is what I am worried about. Because when you give a feeling a sort of scenario, then as a science communicator, as a wildlife educator, as a shark scientist, I can then start saying, all right, let's dissect that and break it down. So, I mean, a lot of these scenes are just so iconic because they were shot so well. Spielberg really knows how to shoot a compelling movie. And he knows how to tap into humanity's innate fear of the unknown. So I have to give my hat off to that because it just does that very well.
Yeah, getting out. It's such a when you get out into nature, and I feel this way whenever I'm in the ocean, or frankly, like when I was in Wyoming a few years ago, and I'm just terrified of grizzly bears. Like
Oh yeah.
I'm so not afraid to admit that. Like just gigantic, just I see these reports like one in like 5 men think they could survive. Yeah, they're just big, just destroy. Did you ever see Grizzly Man?
I didn't
The
know, but
documentary
I've heard of
about
it.
Timothy Trump.
I've heard of it, but I
Oh my
haven't
gosh,
seen it.
this
But I
guy.
mean, grizzlies
Yeah,
grizzlies can fuck you up.
it's a little bit, And you live in Australia. We're like, so we both went to school in Florida, which I always call America's Australia because everything in Florida wants to kill you, especially the governor. But we'll get into that here in a sec. For me, I always like the part on the boat where Quint's talking about the Indianapolis, right? Which I don't know that people really knew that story before Jaws comes out, and it's just this moment where they're just Robert's
a
just
lot of
chewing
people
on scenery
think
in that.
Jaws started the fear of sharks, but really the fear of sharks goes beyond Jaws and actually has a predecessor, which is the World Wars. I mean, there's always been some sort of fear of sharks. You can go back to mythology and see not bad, just figures in folklore, in indigenous storytelling, where a shark has bad characteristics and is painted as a villain, essentially. So, I mean, this goes back millennia, as early as storytelling as possible. But really, the world wars, I mean, you have a bunch of mothers and fathers sending their sons off to war, which is scary enough, but especially for the Navy, which we already didn't know that much about our ocean to begin with then. And then you have these monsters that are attacking our sons and our husbands and our uncles and our fathers after they've been bombed. Like, it just set the stage for fear of these animals that then Spielberg really just amped up with Jaws. And so, I mean, again, it's really smart marketing of tapping into that innate fear of the unknown and also the primal terror really of being hunted. And yeah, just dialing it all the way up. But the Indianapolis, I mean, you know, a lot of people, when they realize, oh, that's not just a little anecdote in there, that's actually true, what happened, especially the
Mhm.
aftermath, I think kind of really almost in a way then adds to the validity of the story of Jaws, which is why I think so many people took that movie as truth, as 100% truth, as fact, as a science documentary instead of what it actually was, which was a blockbuster movie.
I'm wondering, does that make Jaws a sequel to Oppenheimer at this point in time? Like, is that, because
I
that's the
mean,
ship.
I don't know.
Um, Here's a question for you, right? But yeah, you're absolutely right, and I feel like there's this aspect, like you're talking about the idea, because the thing is, like, this fish is actively hunting and choosing humans to hunt and things like that. I mean, it's very much given an idea, a personality in some ways. Um, that and the idea of being eaten alive, I think, is the other, not just being killed by thing. It's really, humans don't get eaten alive. Fish get eaten alive. Other farther down there, it has this film has the amazing effect of taking us off the top of the ladder. Maybe that's what sharks do,
Yeah,
because you're in
instead of
this
us
whole other
being the
world.
hunter, we're the hunted, which is
Yeah,
terrifying to
I mean,
people.
yeah, absolutely. And I still feel uneasy when I get in the water, as much as I want to be like, I'm a man, and blah blah. No, I'm still aware of it, like when
Mm.
I'm back home in Florida, but especially because we've got so many bulls, which we'll talk about here in a bit, I'm sure. Um, where does this movie go astray when people are coming into this movie and I know we can probably sit and take this movie apart. That's not really what we're doing here in HATM. But when you watch this film now as a scientist and things like that, if people are coming, it's like, hey, what's right, what's wrong here? Where does this movie kind of grate at you a little bit as far as understanding shark behavior, shark anatomy, the way we respond to sharks, things like that? Where does this movie go astray?
I think the film really perpetuates the myth of sharks as these like mindless killers. It
Mm-hmm.
also really disregards their ecological significance and the idea that shark attacks are really common. Shark attacks are actually quite rare compared to other risks that we face in the ocean. And so I think those would be the top three things that when I watch the movie, I'm like, oh, you missed the mark with those three. Because a lot of people, and especially I feel like nowadays with the prevalence of social media, when a shark bite happens, wherever it is in the world, you often hear about it multiple times because the news latches onto it and will spit it out multiple times. So a shark bite that has happened, one single shark bite, could be written about thousands of times. And if you're constantly seeing that on your timeline, you innately then think, oh, okay, well, this actually happens quite often when really the numbers are quite low, especially rare or fatal shark bites. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think preying on that fear of this, let's put it bluntly, traumatic event happening more often than not by an animal that is this mindless killer. It is just going after people. It is tearing them apart. It has no, it's torturing you by like hunting you down and stuff like that. I think it really perpetuates this myth of these animals as monsters. And not really paying attention to how smart these animals are. I mean, they've been around for, excuse me, over 450 million years. They've survived so many different extinctions. There's such diversity in the word shark. A lot of people, when I say shark, they think great white, tiger shark, bull shark, hammerhead, all wonderful species. There's over 500 different species, and we are discovering new species all the time. And very few of them interact with humans in that way that they've been implicated or had the finger pointed at them as an animal that has bitten a person. And so I think it's kind of just done a brushstroke of what sharks are, which is, again, playing into that innate fear of these animals as these mindless killers, which Spielberg did amazing at as a horror genre, but it also really messed up sharks and their populations. And we're still seeing some of those issues today. And Peter Benchley actually came out after Jaws happened and said he regrets writing it and spent the rest of his life advocating for sharks. Same with Valerie and Ron Taylor. They actually, when Spielberg realized how much backlash sharks were getting, called them back to the States to do a tour to talk about what sharks actually are like. And that's something that Valerie Taylor is still doing here in Australia, and all over the world, is trying to almost take back what happened from Jaws.
Yeah, I have so many places I want to go there, and I'm just, as you were talking, you have so many points I want to address because you're giving so much great information, and I want to kind of go back to the idea of the shark attack, which as a historian, I look at language a lot, the ways that we, the labels we apply to things affects definitely the way that we think about them and return. And like, so I wonder, is the term shark attack itself even is this an appropriate term to talk about human shark encounters where there are, either a casualty or a fatality or something like that? Was the word attack feels so sensationalized to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the point.
Is there a better term we should use?
There is. So the word attack, I mean, it has so many negative connotations. And so scientists have actually come out, and it's been around since 2013 that officially scientists put out a paper saying, hey, media, we would really appreciate you use these words instead. And so it's shark interactions, fatal shark bite, and just other words that gets the message across of what happened without it having any words that are inflammatory, that have negative connotations in a way. It just tells you, like, fatal shark bite. All right, somebody died from a shark bite. It's not a bloody shark attack or anything like that. You get the message across the same way but different words. So word and language matters, and scientists are aware of that, which is why for a lot of the papers that have come out since 2013, scientists tend to use that verbiage instead. A lot of my articles, so I write for Forbes Science, a lot of the articles that I write, I try to use shark bite or fatal shark encounter or anything else but shark attack. There are some times where I do use shark attack in a specific context, but say, they're very rare to kind of get that CEO, so the people who normally would see it as shark attack see it as something else. But yeah, there's definitely a language recognition when it comes to talking about interactions with these animals.
You talked about Benchley deeply regretting the writing the book at times, although I'm told he still cashed the checks. Right? Spielberg brings people in. So that leads me to this question. Maybe you can kind of spell this out for people who are listening and now want to kind of know the historical impact of this film. Because this conversation we're having was really kind of diving into not only shark biology, but also environmental history in this regard. Because this film has a drastic impact on shark populations worldwide, correct?
Yeah. So a lot of people kind of went out of their way to retaliate against sharks after Jaws. It almost was like Jaws gave them a permission to be really shitty towards sharks. And that was where the regret from Benchley really came from, was seeing, oh, okay, I took this fear and I guess in a way didn't educate enough or have prompts in the back of being like, look, parts of this story are very much made up and teased into something a bit more dramatic for the sake of the storyline. And I think that's an issue with, I mean, even still today with authors and storytellers, where we take something that is real and use it for a storyline that is, for example, in the genre of horror. And I think it's our responsibility to, at some point in the story, let people know, all right, this is what's actually real, what's actuality, in the real world about this topic, and this is what I have fluffed up, because
Mhm.
otherwise people are not going to know the difference, especially on a topic as vague as it was back then as sharks.
Yeah, this becomes even bigger than sharks in a lot of ways, right? Because you were talking about this a little bit earlier on, how important as an apex predator sharks are to ecosystems. So as you have a man-made catastrophe towards shark populations, we also see a catastrophe rising for global fish populations and what other marine ecosystems. Correct?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that there's a really famous quote, and it's been said by so many people, including myself, that I forget who the original person who said it was. But healthy oceans need healthy sharks, and a healthy planet needs healthy shark populations, because the ocean covers the majority of our planet. And I don't think people realize how important of an ecological indicator sharks are. And so, yeah, a lot of people think, oh, the less sharks we have in our ocean, the better. It's safer for us. And it's like, oh, I might be quote unquote safer for you, but it's also really screwing up our planet's balance, which isn't going to be safer for us in the long run.
Yeah, it's I just feel like, yeah, this idea that, oh, it's first of all, I don't know if there's ever such thing as a safe world for humans, and I don't know that there probably should be. We're also parts of this ecosystem. You rid these. It just feels like you rid sharks of this ecosystem, and you have a whole risk of the whole thing coming down on itself.
Yeah, and that's it. I kind of liken it almost to like a Jenga tower, where you take the piece that is sharks off from the
Hmm.
bottom, and it's going to make the whole entire tower collapse. Now, we don't,
Right.
maybe not the entire tower, but large chunks of it, in a way that we don't really know how that tower is going to end up, what's going to be left over afterwards. Which is why so many people are pushing for shark conservation, because we don't want to get to that point where we rid our planet of an animal that's been around for millions of years and has obviously a really important ecological role to play.
Yeah. So now I want to ask you about this stuff because I have so many historians on this pod. So many people come on the pod. But you're our first marine biologist to come on the pod, and I'm so excited about this. And I want to ask you about how do you become a marine biologist, and kind of talk about the influence of sharks in maybe motivating your own career path, and then how does one do sharks as a career? Um, can you kind
There's
of jump? Yeah.
many different pathways for it. There's not just one way to be a marine scientist. The ocean is so vast that it makes sense. There are so many numerous jobs to be involved in it in sort of
Mhm.
one way or another, and marine biologist happens to be one of them. And even the term marine biologist is almost an umbrella term for so many different pathways you can kind of go down with. So I grew up in Puerto Rico, in San Juan, for those who don't know. And I spent my time between there and Mexico. And while I was there, I was pretty much always near the ocean. I mean, that's what you do when you live on an island. You're near the ocean constantly. It's not just something you go visit every now and then, it's very much a presence in your everyday life. And so for me, I was just always fascinated by the ocean. And I knew that in some way, shape, or form, my life was going to be attached to it in some way. And I had so many questions about what I was seeing when I would go visit the coastline and the beaches that we would go to when I was little. And I knew the only way for me to answer a lot of those questions was to go down a path that would allow me to constantly be by the ocean, which just happened to be marine science. When we moved from Mexico over to the States, we moved in the summertime, which is when Shark Week happens. Now, for those who don't know, global audience, for those who don't know, Shark Week is, God, it's been around for such a long time now. I think it's one of the longest running TV series in the world. It's a whole entire week dedicated to just shark shows on the Discovery Channel. So I
Mhm.
just happened to turn to what was then known, and I still think is known, as Air Jaws. And it's this great white shark like breaching out of the water,
Mhm.
chasing this seal. And I was completely enamored, because we don't have, not that we don't have great white sharks in the Caribbean, we do every now and then, as science has shown us, but it's not like it's just on the coral reefs that I grew up in. So I was like, what is that?
Is
And I
that not
wanted
off
to
the
know more
coast
about
of?
it.
Is that not of course South Africa? Is that where they do those?
Yeah. So that's South Africa. And so, yeah, I'd never seen a great white shark before, let alone it breaching out of water. And it's a big animal. I mean, they make emphasis of that on the show. So that just enraptured me. And I remember being very little and telling my parents, oh, I'm going to be a marine biologist. And they're like, yep, that makes sense. And then being a little bit older and being like, I'm going to be a shark scientist. And they were like, cool. Thinking it's a phase, like next week I'm going to be like
Your
a
goth
lawyer
phase.
or a wedding planner or something like that. And I just never got out of that phase. So going down the route to be a marine scientist, it usually involves pursuing some sort of relevant degree in marine biology or some sort of relevant field. So I have quite a lot of friends who have bachelor's and master's in zoology, ecology, conservation, marine biology, marine science, chemistry, physics, just different aspects. And then as you go on to your master's or possibly your PhD, if that's something that you want to end up doing, you get more and more kind of focused in what it is that you're doing. Obviously, for like high school or for the years leading up to you going to a university, it's really important for you to be able to take science classes, to take math classes, to take writing and English classes to make sure you can write, because there's a lot of writing in science. And now there is quite a lot of emphasis on being able to have some sort of computer skills. So be it coding, know how to use ArcGIS or map, being able to do pretty much anything on computers would kind of set you apart, as well as volunteering in something that's related to animals or maybe the sea. For example, volunteering at an aquarium, or a vet clinic or something like that. And so
Right.
from there, you kind of then focus more and more on what it is that you want to study. And that, you do a lot of experimentation and a lot of searching through your departments or what people are doing or people that you look up to, kind of asking them questions of, hey, how did you get into this? Do you have any tips? So yeah, it's a very personal journey, and no two people's journey is going to look alike. But I feel like that's not just for marine biology. I think that's any job in general.
Totally. You end up doing your undergrad in Florida, and then, like I said earlier, why did you choose to go? I mean, I'm told there's water and sharks. You just said this in Australia as well. Why, of all places, why wasn't America good enough for you to stay do your doctoral work?
So
Why Australia of all places?
I actually went and lived in New Zealand first. I did my master's in New Zealand, and
Okay.
I did my bachelor's in Florida, like you said,
Right.
and really
Fled.
wanted to expand what I was studying. And so I was studying a
Right.
lot of coastal sharks in that area, which was fine, and I love them. They will always have my heart. But I wanted to study a little bit more about the deep sea. And so when I saw this opportunity to get a master's in New Zealand studying deep sea sharks and actually the relatives of sharks, so the chimeras, the skates and the rays, which collectively make up the chondrichthyans, like we said at the beginning of the podcast, I kind of took that chance and ran with it, and just happened to get that scholarship and that stipend to study those animals. So I lived in New Zealand for a little bit, and then I just didn't want to go home just yet. I felt like my time living abroad wasn't finished. So I took a year off between my master's and my PhD just to get a taste of the real world and get out of academia for a little bit, because I was really burnt out by the end of my master's, and went to Australia, which was next door. And I had been saying since I was a kid that I wanted to live in Australia, that I wanted to work in Australia, study sharks in Australia, because Australia has quite a lot of sharks. It has over 180 species. And quite a lot of them are endemic. So endemic means you only find them here, nowhere else in the world. So I took a little bit of break, started looking at PhD opportunities here, and got a really good one. And since then, we've had a pandemic. I've had a lot of personal journeys and stuff like that has changed what my initial PhD was going to be, and it's morphed into something else. But yeah, it wasn't that no school in the States wasn't good enough. It's I wanted a more global experience in my education, and I was really lucky to be able to get that through stipends and scholarships.
My gosh, I am first of all, I'm just in awe of your journey because I think it's amazing. I think the fact that you've like done these things is just insane. Like when I was teaching high school, I would always tell my students, I'm like, you have, and I was teaching at a kind of a wealthy high school in Florida, near West Palm Beach, and I would tell students, I'm like, of all the students in the country, you guys come from privilege, and they're all aware because they got out of their Maseratis to come into the school each day. And I was like, you guys have the opportunity to go and do these places and so forth. And like, I just think it's amazing when folks are able to go and do these things and live these other lives and go other places. We almost lived in Australia as a kid. My
Oh,
dad was. This was another place where we crossed paths. Um, my dad worked on oil wells off the coast of Louisiana, and they almost brought us down there. And I think my mom told me, she's like, "Yeah, we were this close to choosing to go down to Australia." I'm like, "Why didn't? Do you know what Louisiana in the South is? Could we? It could not be worse." So I often wonder, like, what life would have been had we moved down there. Um, can you talk about the great white shark itself? Like the differences between reality, like how a shark how does a great white shark do in real life versus what we see on screen, and either in Jaws. They don't come in tornadoes often, is my understanding. um like how big do these things get? How long do they live? What's Do they have personalities? Like how does a shark do? And we'll say,
does the
I know
shark
there are
do?
many of them. How does a shark do? Um, the most formal question I've ever asked. A great white shark, though. This shark, how does it behave? What is different, say, versus what we see on screen versus the lived experience of a shark?
Yeah, so great white sharks, I mean, they got how a great white shark looks down to a T.
Right.
It's got a formidable size, it's got sleek bodies, it's got powerful jaws that are lined with rows of serrated teeth.
Mm.
These are iconic creatures that inhabit coastal waters around the world, from temperate to tropical regions. And so they can grow quite big. On average, and probably the most they kind of get up to is about like 20 feet, so about 60 or 6 meters, not 60 meters, 6 meters
Mm-hmm.
in length. They can weigh quite a few ton. So they are the largest predatory fish on our planet this day and age. And their streamlined bodies and all of the senses that they're kind of packed into that quite a lot of other sharks have as well really makes them highly efficient hunters for what they do hunt. They prey on a variety of marine animals, including fish, seals, sea lions, whales, other sharks as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got this really fearsome reputation, but they rarely pose threats to humans. They are known as the number one shark when it comes to being the most identified when it comes to shark bites. But more often than not, as technology has kind of shown us, with a lot of people now having access to drones and throwing them up in the air and seeing the coastline and what is near us and below us, a lot of times the encounters that we have with these sharks are actually quite peaceful. So people will be swimming around, paddle boarding, scuba diving, not realizing that there's a great white shark, or really a number of species of sharks near them, not caring whatsoever that they're there. So, as a top predator, they really play a vital role in regulating prey populations and maintaining the health of ocean ecosystems. But unfortunately, they do face numerous threats, including habitat degradation, overfishing, unintentional bycatch. So there's quite a lot of conservation efforts that are being put into place to protect their populations and preserve marine biodiversity as a whole.
What about climate change? Are we seeing dangers to great whites as a result of climate change?
Oh yeah, I mean, climate change poses numerous threats to not just great white sharks, but shark populations worldwide. It's leading to habitat loss. It's leading to changes in prey availability, increased ocean acidity, and so we're starting to see sharks in areas that we normally don't see them, which will then affect the marine ecosystems there.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, is going to disrupt entire marine ecosystems, affecting sharks and their prey. as well. So yeah, climate change is definitely one of the major threats that these animals are facing. But the biggest threat by far that not just great whites but sharks in general are facing is unsustainable fishing and unsustainable overfishing and bycatch, which we are seeing. I mean, large percentages of shark populations as a whole be affected by, to the point where there are some of these animals that we haven't even discovered yet and are already going extinct or are in danger of becoming extinct within some of our lifetimes.
You mentioned people not being out in the water and not knowing sharks were around. You talk about your own role. Have you do you dive with sharks in your own role in your own career? Is this a thing you've actually done with great whites as part of your own research?
Yeah, so with great whites, it's always been in a cage. There are some
Sure.
scientists I know who have specific like permits and permissions to tag these animals outside of a cage in some areas, but I prefer to be in a cage because I look quite steel-like.
You're the first person to
But
describe
yeah,
yourself as such.
yeah. Well, look, I'm trying to be very practical in that I look like a very uncoordinated small seal, and it that bit I feel like hinders me, but also me being a bit on the smaller size, they might look at me and be like, it's not really worth going after her. So, I don't want to toss it up. I'd rather be in the cage for my safety and also their safety. But with other shark species, I've been outside of the cage before and I have no issue with it.
Yeah, I've like my understanding is these sharks prefer colder waters. Is that correct? So you're having to rock a wetsuit. I'm assuming
Oh
if
yeah,
you
yeah,
are.
yeah, yeah. For these animals, I mean, you say tropics, but it's still quite cold waters for a lot of these animals. Where I've gone diving with great whites has been Mexico, South Africa, and Australia, and every single time I'm in like a 5-7 mil wetsuit because you're not swimming around in the cage. You're kind of standing still as possible.
Mhm.
So it gets quite cold, and me being from the Caribbean, I hate cold water. If it's not bath
Yeah,
water, I hate it.
yeah. No, I'm right there with you. Um, are there similar attitudes towards the animals in Australia versus, say, the U.S.? Are you noticing? Have you noticed any differences? You've been to a lot of different cool places. Are attitudes towards sharks cultural? Are they global? Like, what do you see when you talk to folks?
I think more often than not, when it comes down to the attitudes towards animals, it gets
Hmm.
down to the nitty gritty of the local. Obviously, a country can kind of have an overall opinion of a shark, but it really depends on a region's specific interaction with those animals. So, an area that sees quite a lot of shark bites is probably going to have well, it could possibly have a negative viewpoint towards sharks than an area that
Sure.
very rarely sees them or sees a different type of shark. And so, the US and Australia, like many other countries, differ in their approaches when it comes to shark conservation and management. Australia often really implements more proactive measures when it comes to their shark mitigation strategies, such as shark nets and drum lines, which they've come under fire for from a lot of experts. US less so about drum lines and shark nets, more about research and education in a way. So it's really interesting to kind of just see the differences between two Western countries, if you will, and how those two areas differ from other parts of the world as well. So I think really any country is going to differ from one another when it comes to how they approach shark conservation because it is just so local specific on how you deal with these issues.
I want to ask you about the Amazon. And
Okay.
by the Amazon, I don't mean the river. I'm talking about the bookseller because when you Google your name, you have books.
I do.
And you have some really cool stuff that you're doing. Can you talk about the books that you've written about marine biology and who you're writing towards? Because I think the work you're doing is actually so freaking important in this regard. Um, my goddaughter doesn't know that she's getting your books, but she is. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as I've kind of said, I am a science communicator and a wildlife educator. And part of what I do is not only do podcasts and classroom visits and presentations for organizations and NGOs, but I also do my outreach and my education through writing. So I do it through Forbes, I do it through other magazine platforms, but I also do it through kids' books because, I, like many others, know the power of getting into a kid's mind from a very early age and starting to shape those world perceptions. And so for me, I very much think that kids are very smart and they have a right to know the issues of our planet, including anything that has to do with our wildlife. So I've authored several books aimed at debunking myths around predators, especially sharks, promoting conservation efforts, and celebrating the beauty and the importance of our natural world. So I've got everything from picture books for little kids, talking about the importance of following your dreams and being able to do whatever it is that you want to do for your dreams. That's Mother of Sharks, which follows my journey as a small girl to who I am today. I've got another picture book that's coming out, actually, if this is coming out in May, at the end of the month, that's looking at whale sharks and Aztec mythology and deities and talking a bit about culture as well. So those are two picture books there. I've got other picture books that are coming out as well that will deal with animals and, again, Central American and Caribbean mythology and folklore, because that's stuff that I grew up with, along with a natural element to it. And those are my two new picture books that will be coming out in the next couple of years. I've got a series for, they're called young adults, but essentially anyone from like the ages of 7 up to 14, 15, called the Wild Survival Series. So it's 3 books, one that focuses on crocodiles, one that focuses on sharks, and one that focuses on jaguars. So all predators with a bad reputation that I educate people about what these animals are actually like, the research that goes into them, the threats that they're facing, along with a little bit of imaginative storytelling in there. And I'm happy to announce that I have just signed a contract for my first adult book, which will be coming out in the next couple of years. And it's looking at my journey as a Latina in shark science, looking at the Western science viewpoint of sharks and talking about the importance of integrating indigenous knowledge and ecology and viewpoints into shark conservation to make it a more holistic, effective management approach, and what the future of shark conservation will hold when we add all of those seats into that table and start listening to everybody. So I'm really excited to get that going as well. But these are all sorts of ways that I try to educate people about our natural world, because I think there's so many different platforms that you can do it. So why not do it through books?
Do you sleep?
I
thought I worked a lot. Oh my god. Now I know that, yeah, you know what? I now know if I get bored, I can text you because you're up. Oh my gosh. This is so exciting. I am so excited for, oh my gosh, the stuff that you're talking. Oh my god, this is amazing. I'm going to post links to all the stuff on the Twitter thread and all the, are you kidding me? Oh gosh, thank you. All right, I want to start kind of, we'll circle back. I don't, whatever. We're talking about great whites in this episode. Do you have favorite sharks? Do you
I
have?
do.
You talked about ones that are close to your heart. What do you have? What are your favorite sharks?
My top one is a tiger shark. They're really charismatic. So they're cool. Beautiful. They're just, the hunting style and the way that they're built just fascinates me.
Do tell.
So their teeth, for one thing, are really distinct in that they're not just a triangle serration, they're not just curved, they're both. So they almost act like can openers in a way. And I just think they're beautiful to look at. You know, it's nature's engineering at its finest, in my point of view. The animal itself, it's a large, robust shark that is covered in tiger-like stripes, which is why it's called tiger shark, that are really, really vibrant when it's young and they fade as they age. And I've been very lucky and fortunate to have gone diving with them quite a few times. And they're very charismatic. They very much have personalities, in that some are kind of a bit more boisterous and in your face, and you kind of have to take your camera or a PVC pipe and push them away. And other times they want nothing to do with you. So there's just a lot of intelligence when you look into their eyes and at their face that just fascinates me. The next one, it's one that I think a lot of people don't realize is actually a shark, but it's called a Caribbean rough shark. And the best way to describe it is it looks like a burnt wonton.
I love this shark already.
Yeah, it's
I'm also
great.
hungry. It's getting towards dinner time, so go on. This may
They
affect
look
where I
like
order dinner
burnt
tonight.
little wontons, like little dumplings almost in a way. And they're
Somewhere
just
out
these
there, Caribbean rough shark is getting offended by this. Like, hey,
I say that in the most loving way possible because like dumplings and wontons are some of my favorite food. So I
thank you.
very much love them. They just have such a cute face. And when I tell people this is a shark, they're like, "No." And I was like, "Yeah, this is a shark." They're like, "But it's so cute." And I'm like, "Exactly." So many people have this preconceived notion of what a shark looks like that they don't realize
Right.
there's some species that are freaking adorable. So it's a deep sea shark that obviously lives in the Caribbean, and there's not actually that much that we know about them. And I just find them so intriguing that there's an animal that looks like them off of like my home, in my home waters, and they're just incredible to look at. They've got some gorgeous patterning, almost like marbling on them as well. They're just
Mm-hmm.
beautiful creatures. So yeah, those are my top two.
I love it. I love it. All right, let's circle back here. The final question I always ask people about when we do these things is, is such and such a history movie, but is Jaws a science movie? How do you think when you think about this movie? What is this movie?
Look, while Jaws incorporates some scientific elements into it, such as like shark
Mm-hmm.
anatomy, a little bit about like shark behavior and whatnot, it ultimately prioritizes entertainment over scientific accuracy. So that to me makes it more of a thriller than a
Mm-hmm.
scientific movie. It's not, a David Attenborough documentary or anything like that. It very much is a blockbuster movie.
Now as I cruise through my kitchen here in a little bit, I'm going to have David Attenborough's like voice in my head. It's like the middle-aged man going through. Oh, he's found the cupboard, so it doesn't look good for the ramen noodles tonight. So that's going to be so bad. The voices. All right, for people who want to find you on social media, because one of the things I found you through social media, I know that there are a ton of other amazing marine biologists out there doing some really cool work, really publicizing the stuff that they're doing through social media. How do people find you? Where do they find you online to learn more about what you're doing, more about the sharks that you're studying, the books that you're publishing, the 47 books you're publishing? Where do people find you?
So on social media, I'm on Twitter, which is now known as X at MCMSharksXX. On Instagram, Facebook, Threads, I'm on Melissa Cristina Marquez. On Blue Sky, I'm at Melissa Cristina Marquez Blue Sky, whatever it is. And I will be opening up a YouTube channel pretty soon, and that's also at Melissa Cristina Marquez. So check that out and subscribe.
This is going to be on our YouTube channel as well. We're
Yay!
also opening it. Like, it's heck yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, so I am so thankful to you for taking the time. I know that you should be writing. So
Don't remind me.
oh my gosh, dude. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time. I've been looking forward to doing this for like a year now. So to be able to sit down here with you from across the way, I was so looking forward to this all day long. So I can't tell you how thankful I am to you for taking the time and talking to me about this movie and your work and everything else like that. So thank you so much.
No, it is my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk about sharks and Jaws in general. So super excited to do it and finally get to chat face to face instead of through Twitter messages.
Oh my gosh, finally, right? So awesome.